because antiretroviral drugs are largely viral. So, in that matter, therefore, you can see that in this particular case, you have defied the whole ethic of debate. Next up, Team Negative comes here and attempts to construe everything to begin from a behavioral standpoint. Now, I do not know how your strategy was informed, but a failure to construe this outside of a parameter that would be geographical robbed you of the opportunity to strike out certain arguments, such as poverty, certain arguments such as people cannot have availability to drugs, or we are not having enough enforcement. A failure to construe it on those grounds robbed you of ability to strike out such points. Next up, they told you that in the event that someone, in cross-examination, you were asked, in the event that someone misuses a particular drug, is it behavioral or is it purely scientific and biology and medicine? In other words, if it is someone's individual choice, what then is biology and medicine? Seem to abandon the point in the water. So I ask myself, and so what? Okay, I have rewarded you for telling us Team Negative, Team Affirmative was construing it in a narrow sense. So what? Drag us into other sites. For example, fungal infections. You realize that fungal infections are mainly and mostly transmitted maybe due to things like physical contact, meaning behavioral sciences. Look at how people congregate. Are you understanding in that point? Antifungal falls under antimicrobial because fungi are microbes. So, characterize whatever evidence you've given us beyond that ambit, and I think the third affirmative asks you that. So, hey, you've spoken about society. Now, guarantee us that in your interpretation of society and its behaviors, it is inevitably Therefore, that draws me back to the speech of affirmative 1. It ought to have been your job to then distinguish and say, you know what? Overuse and misuse are quite different terms. But once overuse and misuse are one and the same thing, we are now driven to understand it from the point of team affirmative. Like, it might be that people are just using these drugs over and over again that is now leading it to perfect thing. I'm swallowing my drugs. Next up, I will blame you because in speech 1, you agree that you're interpreting it as modern medicine. And then I'm hearing arguments such as herbal medicine. In other words, should we construe modern medicine to include herbal medicine? Affirmative 1, tell us, negative 1, tell us that. Next up, you're asked, in your interpretation of poverty, you say that because people are poor, they will then therefore go and use drugs that are not as effective. But then, in your previous speech, you had just stated that no, National Drug Authority's mandate is to distribute the most effective drugs, the best drugs. Therefore, I ask myself, are you people just pandering your side such that whenever something is good, you fall on it? Because you have said National Drug Authority distributes the best drugs. But then you say poverty makes people go for less effective drugs, something of the sort. So I'm like, that means National Drug Authority is actually not doing its mandate. That means there's something medicinal about these drug components, meaning they are weaker drugs than other drugs. Are you understanding my characterization of that? Then they again tell you, the Hail Mary was, they told you, there is common existence of germs, meaning your argument of poverty, that people cannot afford drugs, people are staying in maybe bad areas, they told you even if you're as clean as possible, some of these microbes are airborne, some of them are waterborne, and -3 comes and tells us, you know what, boil your water. But then now, if you've boiled your water, what of the microbes that are airborne? How are you going to take yourself out of the scope of that? Meaning, when I'm construing my debate, I mainly decided it on the aspect of content and strategy. But strategy was what held the most water. Meaning, definition of key terms, and then how that helped you. Identification of a parameter, and then how that helped you. Thank you.
Can we have silence, please, at the back? People at the gallery, please keep quiet. The judges are giving verdicts. Respect, okay? Yeah, thank you so much. To begin with, I also want to begin by appreciating both teams and all speakers for the efforts that you have put in to make it up to this stage. It's really not taken for granted that you can put in all the sacrifice and the effort to make sure that you qualify up to such a stage, which is the semi-finals, more so for a debate tournament like high school Crossfire, the leading debate tournament in this country. Thank you so much. To begin with, ladies and gentlemen, today's debate, we had a debate that was looking at comparison. We had a team affirmative that was looking at the contribution of biology and medicine towards the development of AMR, and then we had a team negative that was looking at the contribution of society and behavior towards the development of AMR. So, at the end of the day, personally, I based my judgment on the ability of a team to draw a causal link on their main point of argument towards the contribution of the development of AMR. Meaning the team that was able to convince beyond reasonable doubt that what we are advocating for at the end of the day brings to the development or to the contribution of AMR, that is the team that scored my point. And then lastly, this is just a matter of reminder. Team affirmative, you have the burden to prove beyond reasonable doubt, and team negative, you have the burden of refutal, and after making a refutal, you have a burden to give us an alternative. I appreciate the fact that both teams were able to stand to their alternatives, to the alternative of biology and medicine, to the alternative of society and behavior. However, whenever we are having such a debate and then your opponents are able to put up an alternative, make sure that now the burden shifts back to you to make a refutal on the alternative that they've put up, and after making a refutal, make a standpoint to alternative. I so pray. Thank you so much.
Now, this debate, first of all, team affirmative and team negative, your role was not to give a solution to antimicrobial resistance. Both of you, and this goes to team negative, you were trying to give us solutions and ways in which we can combat antimicrobial resistance. However, this resolution also did not need a house or anything to do with that, because it was a what? A value debate. Now, the biggest obligation that you both had was to show a causal link or a direct way in which it is biology and medicine for team affirmative that is directly causing what? AMR. And then for team negative, your role was to show that no, it is actually what? Society and behavior. And quote me right, directly. A causal link, directly. So indirectly and everything else is irrelevant. Furthermore, team negative, team affirmative, question team negative in a POI. I'm not going to repeat any of the things that have been mentioned by the previous judges. They questioned in a POI that with the right medicine, can there be antimicrobial resistance? Team negative, in my opinion, I feel like you failed to answer that question from the start to the end. The third negator was able to try and answer it that in case it's a wrong medicine or anything of that, but the key question was, with the right medicine, can there be antimicrobial resistance? And you did not answer that. Now back to team affirmative. Team affirmative, you were supposed to show a direct. You merely telling us that society involves biology, the water is biology, the food is biology, and all that does not show a causal link between biology and what? Antimicrobial resistance. It's merely a generalization of everything because we know it. The air is what? Is biology. And then, team negative, you forgot to entirely rebut the part of medicine. Because this resolution involved biology and medicine, which is the POI I mentioned before. They asked you, yes, apart from the body having resistant genes and all that, aren't there medicines that actually people take in, but due to taking it overly, which is overuse, the body ends up having its what? Its organisms having to be able to mutate and fight against the what? That disease. So at the end of the day, you all failed. You all had missing questions that both teams were able to what? To answer. However, in my conclusion, I based my judgment and my awarding on the team that was able to show a direct causal link between biology and medicine towards AMR or behavior and society towards AMR. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So primarily this. Okay, so primarily, basically, first of all, thank you for the great debate. I think it was worth a semi-final. Now, I will not delve so much into what judges have said, so I will be quick really. This debate, one, like you highlighted in both your speeches, is a comparative debate. It is like this historical argument that we have, the hen and the egg, what really came first. So persuasion and creating a direct nexus goes a long way to make your case. Now, but I want to comment small on the parameters, and I think Judge Calvin has talked about it. The negative team, when you challenge the parameters, what exactly do you want? Are you just challenging to say they are wrong, or are you just are you challenging to say if we are correct in our challenge, there is so much that can contribute to this debate, therefore you justify it? But also, team affirmative, in narrowing down to those parameters, what exactly were you running away from? Because your arguments are substantial, even if you're talking about viruses, fungi. So why really would you focus on an argument that runs through 4 speeches about parameters, and there is no big thing that it is going to create for either of the houses if we say it is bacteria or if we say it is bacteria and more. So really I felt like it was a useless argument on parameters, because none of the houses justified that if it remains bacteria, we have this advantage, or if it is now viruses and fungi and bacteria, we have this advantage. But moving forward, my judgment based on, I think, what was the 2 best arguments in the debate, one from the affirmative team and one from the negative team. The best argument from the affirmative team was that in the best case scenario, you have received the right prescription, taken the right medicine. It is genetic that bacteria will still mutate. It will still change. Whether you want or not, it will still change. As to whether you have taken the best prescription and followed it to the dot, it will still change. That was their best argument. The best argument from the negative team was that, you see, there is a place of choice. And this place of choice is that even if it is medicinal, that if I overuse a drug,